Welcome to another episode of In the Name of Service, a podcast committed to sharing the untold stories of those who selflessly serve. Each episode features an interview with men and women who have been called to a variety of service-focused roles, such as the military, law enforcement, ministry, volunteering, and more. You aren't likely to know the names of the individuals you meet here, but our hope is by the end of our time together, you'll not only know their stories, but possibly be inspired to write your own in some way. Humble in nature, but strong in character, these everyday men and women showcase what it is to truly be a servant. We're glad you're here. Now here's your host, Dr. Barb Thompson.
Okay, thank you so much for joining me today for another inspiring episode of In the Name of Service. I'm your host, Dr. Barb Thompson. As a United States Army veteran and operational psychologist, I've spent my career working with military and law enforcement units, conducting in-depth interviews with hundreds of individuals who are hoping to earn their place on high-risk, high-performing teams. In most cases, they've already put in years of grueling physical and mental work just to get a chance to serve and sacrifice more. And that type of selflessness is special, and I feel worthy of recognition. While each person's story is unique and every path to service different, their goals are similar: to do something more, to be part of something bigger, to make a difference. These difference makers were the catalyst behind this podcast, and it's my privilege to share their stories with you. Today, I get to introduce Christine. She and I had the opportunity to work together for a few years at a unit she's still currently working with. She is a breath of fresh air, the best teammate, just a bright light in any room. And I cannot wait to honestly get to know you even better, Christine, because some of these things that we're going to talk about today, they don't come up in everyday conversation at work. So let's just start off by you telling us a little bit about yourself.
Wonderful. Thanks, Barb. It's an honor to be here. So I am a athletic trainer by trade. I am also a mom to a wonderful 19-month-old and a military spouse. I'm a Christian, and I'm also an online teacher. So I've done some teaching over the last 5 or 6 years through an online program. I graduated through the University of Delaware with my bachelor's in athletic training back when it was still just a bachelor's in athletic training in 2012. I have a master's in sports management, so I kind of jumped into the business field a little bit for the master's, and I completed that online, right?
Yeah.
A little bit of leadership aspect with it too, and that was kind of the motivation behind that. But I did that online while I was working full-time down in Georgia. And then I finished up my Doctorate of Athletic Training from Temple University in 2022, again online, and with the support of my current job, we were able to make that happen, which was pretty awesome.
Congratulations. See, there's already, I didn't know that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Now, what are you teaching?
So I teach in the sports management program where I graduated with my master's, and I teach in both the undergraduate and the graduate programs. I really enjoy it. It's just another opportunity to serve and give back and kind of help shape young minds. So online degrees were kind of pre-pandemic, were just few and far between, but they worked great for the working individual. And I think it takes a lot of grace to as you go through those programs, there's a lot of life that can happen with these individuals. There's people who are, in their 50s and even 60s that are like, hey, I've got a whole life. I've got family, I've got kids, but I'm trying to go to school in my free time. And then you've also got your average 19-year-old that is also trying to have some form of traditional college experience, but is also going to school online, which is not traditional at all. So, and now since the pandemic, I think we're starting to see more online opportunities. And for me, the appeal of doing a distance learning program was that I could still work full time and keep a roof over my head and not have to take necessarily as many student loans, and still be able to advance my career and my education. So that was huge for me. I took a couple years after I did my bachelor's to figure out exactly what I wanted to do a master's in. Now athletic training is entry-level master's, so you don't really have a choice now if you're going to do the program. But but I wanted to see, it's the profession's expanding, which is really cool to see. But now I wanted to see what I wanted to do. And I really fell in love with leadership, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but I really fell in love with leadership and wanted to make sure I geared my master's towards something that would help be a catalyst to that. Now as a military spouse, the appeal of teaching online is that I can take even just a little bit of a side hustle, I can take
Yes.
that anywhere. So, and I can continue to serve others as
Right.
I'm doing that. So I really love that online teaching component throughout the last, I think I've been doing it since 2016. So what, 7 years now? Is that seven? Golly day. But yeah, 7 years.
Yes. That's a long time.
It is. It flies too.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to call you Dr. Castillo for the rest of the interview. That's so cool.
Yeah, it was,
Okay,
I
how
finished,
in the world? Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I finished it with a newborn. So I finished that degree. I figured I could either do it with a mobile 1-year-old or I had like 2 semesters left. So I could either finish it with a newborn or finish it with a mobile 1-year-old. And I think I chose the lesser of the two evils. So it was
Oh,
rough, but
yes,
it's
you
done.
did. You did. How did you even get into that field, Christine? By the way, I'm just always so jealous of your team. I always loved hanging out with your team. You guys probably guessed by my frequent appearances down in the gym and in y'all's space. But you really get to, you're so close, literally physically, kind of touching the people that you're serving, and it's just a really, really neat vocation. How did you get into it?
So athletic training, I mean, honestly, the good Lord's what brought me there ultimately. Growing up, I'll go back pretty far, but growing up, my dad was a really influential in kind of my ability to spread my wings and fly and get out of the house and chase my dreams. So he was always big about putting strong role models in front of me. It was never like, hey, you're a girl, so you can't do anything. Like, you can only do this or you can only do that. It was like, I'm going to put strong role models in front of you. I have two wonderful parents that both of them were in our home growing up, and but my dad was very much so like, let me put strong role models in front of you. Um, Find something that you love, find something that you're passionate about, and make that a career. So growing up, I kind of went through several career options. I would say, like in high school, I've always been a little bit of an old soul, where thinking kind of like, what do I want to be when I grow up? And all of them were kind of, I would call them servant careers, so teaching, like volunteer organizations, stuff like that. But I ended up having several injuries in my attempts to be athletic. We'll call it that, my attempts to be athletic. um, and I realized pretty quickly, I actually was looking at physical therapy as a degree, and there's a lot of overlap between physical therapy and athletic training. But I was looking at physical therapy originally. We have a good family friend who's been a uncle to me throughout the years that was an athletic trainer. He's like, hey, at the time, athletic training was still entry level bachelor's. He's like, if you want to go PT, great. But go athletic training undergrad, because I think you'll really enjoy still being around these sports and the athletic population. I was like, you know what, you're right. Like this sounds very interesting. So I got into the thick of it at University of Delaware. Realized that I really wanted to stay around athletics, not really understanding that like physical therapy had different little facets that you could be a part of too. But I had uh, really started to kind of get into it, but realized I wasn't really into like the traditional college setting. Like, I had a good time during my clinicals. Like, I really, I learned a lot. I ended up interning for a small D2 school my senior year, like off campus, and really was like, kind of able to come into my own and still enjoyed it. But I was like, I don't know if I want to be a part of traditional college athletics. And it was, so I went to college. My freshman year was 2008. I had friends that were deploying that had enlisted. And let me tell you, I got really good at sending care packages overseas and could get homemade cookies overseas still soft. So that was kind of
Oh,
my what I call my
incredible.
superpower at that point. But I realized
Yes.
I want to do something more than just bake cookies. I was like, how can I serve? I kind of wrote a military career of myself, like my own, off because of just shoulder injuries and kind of my propensity for banging myself up musculoskeletally. But I was like, what can I do to help serve our people who serve us and protect our freedoms? What can I do to make that a career? I was like, how can athletic training fit into that? And I remember walking back from class one day and I'm like talking, I'm like, good Lord, like, give me a sign. Like, what do you want me to do? And I look up on the side of Perkins Student Center at University of Delaware, and there's a literal sign that says civilian jobs working with the military. And I was like, man, you got a sense of humor. And there was a time I stopped and I like kind of half cried, but also was laughing. And I was like, all right, I'm going to take this as like
Right.
the sign that you're giving me. And,
Done.
right. So like,
Yes.
I went into a deep dive, borderline obsession, of just trying to make my connections and figure out like, hey, does athletic training exist in the military setting and how does it exist?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so I knew the value, somehow I already knew the value at like 20 years old of making connections and networking. Um, and I started building kind of that base of, all right, what's going on in the military setting? I had found out about Center for the Intrepid and all the great work that they were doing with wounded soldiers and wounded service members, and thought maybe that would be somewhere where an athletic trainer would exist. And there were some different grants that I found myself a part of. There was opportunities with the Injury Prevention Research Lab of Uniformed Services University, and that was kind of my first foot in the door. But I ended up just kind of like it snowballed from there. People knew people, and the athletic training community in the military at the time was, and it still is pretty small. We're still technically considered an emerging setting by the National Athletic Trainers Association
Right.
standards. But so it was very easy to kind of be like, hey, this person knows this person. Let's get introduced. And this was back in, so I graduated 2012. I'd already done a couple like data collection trips both to West Point and Camp Lejeune, doing a couple of different their projects with Uniformed Services University. And then in 2013, the Auburn University Warrior Athletic Training Program expanded their graduate assistant program at Fort Benning, because they were basically taking, instead of like graduate assistants as athletic trainers working with a sporting team, they were working with
Yeah.
basic training units down at Benning. And in 2013, it expanded
Right.
to include full-time positions across 5 different brigades, which was huge. So I actually, I didn't,
Yeah.
at the time, it was actually an entry-level position, which was awesome. And I took a chance and ended up getting a job down there and going down there. And then that just kind of expanded from there too. Grace of God, everything kind of worked out the way that it did. That fire, that passion was lit underneath me, and I wasn't taking no for an
Yeah.
answer. So, my heart and soul was into that in every way, shape, and form. And it just went from there. It snowballed from there.
Yeah. You have taken on another role. I mean, let's talk first about like what's most difficult about working in the military environment. And for you, you've worked traditionally, like looking at the people you've worked with are high performers.
Right. So
What do you think has been what? Yeah.
so I think early on, one of the biggest challenges was just understanding the population, understanding what was going on, understanding, like, I could never fathom what some of the guys that I was working with had been through. Guys that had enlisted right around
Right.
9/11 as a result of 9/11, stuff that happened in this world that nobody should ever have to see, process, do, etc. So my family had not had any touch points with military since World War II. So I would argue I kind of had a little bit of a romanticized version of what the military was like
Yeah.
when I first got down to Benning,
Sure.
because I had no idea. And I distinctly remember I was working at the one of the combatives facilities, and I walked up behind one of my NCOs that I thought had heard me, because I was speaking, but he was rather hard of hearing. And I came up behind him, and the way that he spun around so quickly, I ducked, because like the eyes weren't him. Like it's like I scared him, and he wasn't where he was
Yeah.
for that like split second in time. And then you saw the body relax, and you saw him realize like, oh, hey, Christine's right there. Like, and I apologized immediately. I realized I was the one who had screwed up, and all I did was walk behind him. And that was probably the first like pull the wool off my eyes experience of like, okay, there's a lot of good that can be done here, and it's not just musculoskeletal. So I think one of
Yes.
the, like it's it was hard just kind of it was hard getting my foot in the door, but it was hard just kind of starting to understand my population and understanding the true needs of my population. When I was working conventional Army, before I came up here, it was, this was the first time that they had embedded healthcare in their entire careers. Guys that had been in the military for 15 years, and they're like, hey, nobody has given a damn about me before. Like, why are you different? Like, why?
Right.
This is the first time somebody's actually like put hands on me and not just said, here's 800 milligrams ibuprofen, like take a new drink water. Like, you're actually trying to help me and fix me. And then I come up like,
yeah, or here's what you can't do.
Exactly. Like, and I'm like, look, these guys aren't going to stop jumping out of airplanes. These guys aren't going to stop doing what they do. And like, most of them identify with this. Like, this is not like you identify yourself with sports, right? Like, like a student athlete in college gets injured, and that can be the end of their athletic career. Maybe that changes scholarship stuff. But at the end of the day, like, you are a student athlete. So ideally you're going to school for something else, right? So eventually, like, hopefully you come over that hurdle and you'll figure out something else. Very few people actually end up going professional athletes. But like, when you talk about the tactical athlete, the person who enlisted or commissioned to take, like, to either for a career, to serve our country, whatever their motives may be, like, if you take their ability to operate physically away, like, that's their livelihood. That's how they support their family. That's how they identify. Like, that is their job, right? That is what they do for a living. Like, there might not be a backup plan. There's not a plan B. So that was probably one of the hardest hurdles going into it.
Well, and there's very few jobs out there. Yeah. Where the job itself is something that you've agreed to give your life for. That's a different
exactly. And it's
job.
That. Yeah. I mean, that is probably one of the most humbling things. Like, I can do good work and I can help somebody rehab their ACL. I can help somebody get back out there. But like, if I don't give my all to this individual, like, that could be the difference between them being fast enough to survive or fast enough to save somebody else, or pain-free enough to be able to go in and do their job and be a part of their team. Like, it can be the difference between life and death. And I think that that's a heavy weight, but that's also a calling, right? That's every reason of why my why is what it is. Like, why I do this job is to, like, this is my way to that I feel the good Lord has put on my heart to serve our country and serve others that have had the bravery to be able to sign their name on the line to protect my freedoms, to even choose my profession, right? Like it's a humbling honor to be a part of it. And I think coming into the special operations field, I thought I had a good handle on what life was in the military, but it's a different community, obviously, altogether, with different mission sets, different stressors. And a lot of times, like, unlike conventional Army, where it's a longer deployment, they're gone for a while and they come back. Like, these are quick turnarounds, and then all of a sudden they're expected to be right back into normal life. Like, they're expected to go take the trash out, or go be dad, or what it is. And it's very much so, like, just nonchalant, like a part of day-to-day operation. But it's not a nonchalant job, right? So it's kind of having to have those two different identities and seeing, like, how can I help that individual in multiple ways. We had a flight surgeon that you would know that used to work with the unit that used to call us the bartenders of the unit. So the clinical staff, the bartenders of the unit, right? So,
Yes.
So, you guys will talk when they're on a table, or service members will talk while they're on the table. And there's been multiple times where, not breaking, confidentiality or trust, but I'll have a session and something just doesn't, I'll work on somebody's knee or their back, and just something just doesn't sit right. And I'll go check who that aligned psych doc is, or the provider that can help them from a mental side of the house, and say, hey, I just had a conversation with so-and-so, and these were the kind of the red flags that I saw. Do you mind doing a drive-by with this individual to kind of just check, see if they're all right? Right. So, that's I think bartenders was kind of the best way of describing us. Like, we kind of see it all, So,
it's already a vulnerable position. Yeah.
Right.
Injury it is the scariest thing for them too, because they've typically lived this life where they are almost superhuman compared to the average individual, and an injury can do so. It's like a crisis, right? Like, a normal person gets injured, you don't like it, it's not any fun, but there's definitely, I think, more mental, emotional, even spiritual consequences when some of our most talented warriors are injured. And then that is the time when you step in and you're in those vulnerable moments with them in some of their lows, but
For sure. And maybe
that's
it's
a
the first
lot to
time.
take on. You mentioned the heaviness.
Yeah.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
And that's, and it might be the first time, like, I'll touch on one other thing and then I'll comment on that one too. But, it might be the first time that individual slowed down, right? So like maybe they've been running in
Yeah,
their
right.
mission set for the last 5 years, and then suddenly it comes to a screeching halt. And that's the first time that they've had to deal with some of those demons or things that kind of are just been kind of pushed underneath the surface for so long. And that's when you start to see things kind of come to a head. And it is like, it can get heavy. And I think that's so important of why it's even me as a provider, that I have to have my support network too, right? Like, I have to have,
Right.
I have to
Yes.
have my ability to decompress, whether that's talking to a chaplain, whether that's talking to my own psychologist, whether that's talking to my husband, right? Like that's knowing how to decompress after some of that weight sits on your shoulders, right? So, and in many cases, we might be talking about life and death with people that we're working with, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
Right.
it's where you can kind of check that, but also knowing that, like, hey, I'm doing everything I possibly can for this individual, right? Like I'm putting
Hmm.
everything I have into it. But at the end of the day, like, they are a human who makes their own decisions too. So like making sure that I can have that separation, and know that,
Yeah.
like, hey, especially in this setting versus like conventional, like we have every resource at the fingertips to help that individual. So it's making sure making the right connections, but also like having my strong support network is what is pivotal. And I think, like, I've said for years where um, work can be crappy, but home has to be good. Or like if home is hitting some bumps, then like work needs to be good. Like you can't. I feel like you can't have both be bad at the same time. But so like having that strong like home foundation and a life outside of the job, I think is so pivotal and so important into maintaining the ability to do this job without burnout, or to mitigate burnout, or to make sure that I'm at my best. So I can, if I don't take care of me too, I can't take care of
Yeah.
others. I have nothing left to give. I think that was honestly one of the biggest challenges postpartum. We just had our first kid like February of 2022. And man, my cup was empty. I'm somebody who has been
Right.
very strong in their faith for a very long time. And that is my rock, and that is my source of my strength. But like, I dealt with postpartum anxiety. I'm somebody who, like, I feel like I've never really dealt
Yeah.
with true mental health concerns, but like, I was down, my kid
Hmm.
was upstairs sleeping, and I was downstairs having a panic attack because I wasn't watching him breathing and making sure he was still alive, right? Like, so, and then I'm
Yeah.
2 months later going back to work and dealing with like, hey, I've only identified as an athletic trainer up until this point, and work has been my baby. Like, for gosh sakes, I'm completing a doctorate with a newborn. Like, I care about my career. Like, I never thought I would have trouble going back to work. Never thought I would have trouble. I thought I would just like, I mean, and it was a blessing because my parents take care of my kids too. So like, I know who's taking care of my child, but I like,
Yeah.
I sobbed for probably the first 2 weeks coming back to work, like almost every single day going in, and I love my job.
Yeah.
But I was struggling
Right.
with having that new identity now as a mom, and how to kind of split my time and like figure life out. I distinctly remember, like, while I was
Yeah.
still on maternity leave, even my husband, bless his sweetheart, had gotten back from a deployment like when I was in my second trimester, and was dealing with that in its own, like all the things that he kind of dealt with to kind of process that. But I was dealing with massive amount of hormone fluctuations postpartum. That was but a massive amount of hormone fluctuations postpartum, and like, he's looking at me like I've got six heads, like, okay, you're broken, what's wrong with you, how do I fix you? Like, and I'm like, I'm not broken, I
Yeah.
just need to I don't know what's like, I can't
Right.
control this. and uh and
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
different. It's not the Christine he
No,
knew,
no, because
right?
he's always
Yeah,
seen this like person who's like
yeah,
unwavering strength, right? Like, and not
right.
to toot my own horn on that, but I've always been somebody who's like, okay, look, I'm the level-headed one of the two of us. Like, let's I can handle anything you throw at me. No notice deployments. I can handle it. Like, I got this. But now all of a sudden you put this little like fragile thing in my
Oh
hands where that
yeah,
I'm like, okay, well, I'm hardwired to take care of this, but I'm also like, I need to go to work. Like, so it was a matter of kind of finding that balance and taking care of myself too. Fortunately, where I work has been super flexible and gave me the grace I needed when I needed it. And, I sought help, and that was the first thing, was like, hey, not being afraid to ask for help. And I think that applies to our population too. And,
right.
um, like, I recognized that I
Yes.
was not okay, um, and that I needed additional assistance. I needed people to talk to. I needed people to tell me that I wasn't alone, right? Like, because it felt alone. I was the first person of my friend
Hmm.
group that had kids, and
Right.
nobody else was in my shoes, right? So it felt like nobody else was in my shoes. It always feels like you're like the only one going through these things, but um,
I know,
but
right?
so it was a matter of like, okay, like taking the time and then to lean back into my faith, because that was so important for me, and figure out like, okay, like, God, you've got this. Like, what do I need to do? Like, where do I need to be? Like, where does my heart need to be? And it's okay to shift what your calling is too. Like, and right now at
Right.
that moment he
Yeah.
was calling me to be a mom, but also like, okay, how do we benefit, like, how do we still balance being this wanting to serve others in the way that I currently serve them, and like, can we still make both work, or do we need to look at a career shift, right? So like, I
Right.
think it's kind of, there's a lot of things that I've learned about myself just in the last year and a half, and honestly, like,
Hmm.
dealing with kind of that first bout of mental health struggles of my own, like, I think has made me a better clinician. It's made me more in tune. It's made me
100%.
more in tune with
Absolutely.
my population, and honestly, as a result of it, like, I've gotten super connected with some of these community resources that have helped me both on the my side of town and kind of over on towards where a lot of our guys live. I've gotten connected with a lot of these local
Yeah.
resources. It's kind of become a passion project, and I've actually sent lists of resources to spouses that are going through similar
Hmm.
things, or maybe need some, physical therapy postpartum, like things like that. And it's I think it's something that the good Lord put on my heart to help, another way to serve others and serve this population, even down to building out prenatal and postpartum programming for um, either unit members or referencing ones that spouses could use. So, just a different niche of ways that I can help individuals. But um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think we, especially like, we should be the first, those of us who serve others should be the first for to admit like that it's okay to be just a normal
Yeah.
human being, and that every single person
Mhm.
struggles.
For sure.
But the but the faster you reach out and you don't isolate yourself, then the faster that track is back to feeling quote unquote like yourself again. And in the midst of that, like when you choose to let go, right, of the pride and the shame and the
Uh-huh.
guilt and the lie that we're the only one going through that, when you let all of that go, like the gift is so much bigger. It's such a good
Oh yeah.
trade-off.
But it's
But
a
it's so scary.
it's a daily recommitment too, right? Like, my
Yeah,
my
yeah.
son was sick a couple weeks ago, and I had to call out last minute from work, because it's usually like, inevitably, it's always when like my husband can't flex or something like that, right? That's when the stars
Of
align. But
course.
um
Yeah.
he's super helpful. He's a wonderful, wonderful husband and dad, but there's just sometimes when like it's mom that has to bend, right? So and I had to call out from work last minute, and there's a guilt that's attached to that, because it was
Yeah.
I was always the dependable one. I was the one that was, like, yeah, I can be there and help you set up with this at 4 o'clock in the morning. Like, no problem. But now I got to say no. So
Exactly. Right.
there's a guilt
Right.
that's attached to
Right.
that. And you can have a great career and you can have a wonderful family, but there is at some point when you have to prioritize one over the other. Right. So,
Right.
those two
Right.
things will compete. And it's a matter of, again, having that good support structure at home. A good support structure at home, and making sure you know where you can give, and just give and take, and communicating with your job or your spouse what you need. And I felt guilty, and it took me a little bit to let that go. I'm like, I had to shift things around. Somebody had to pick up
Yeah.
my slack, this and that, but
Right.
it's okay. And it's letting that guilt go. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a daily recommitment for sure. And there's a lot of prayer that goes into that too. So
Yes. Well, tell us a little bit more about your experience as a military spouse, um, and just what that's been like for you, some of those challenges unique to that experience.
I think I joked when we first got married. I got drop kicked into it. That was my experience as a military spouse initially. Um, we had been we had gotten married in our backyard, eloped kind of military style, which nobody in my family understood. I think they were expecting a baby announcement shortly after. They're like, "Why would you do this?" And I'm like, "Why? Like,
Right.
it's just a different
Yeah.
lifestyle." And the reason
Yeah.
why we did it was proven immediately almost following. So he had just gotten back from a deployment, and I said, "Look, I don't want to do another deployment as a girlfriend." He had gotten stuck when the whole COVID pandemic happened. So he was supposed to go for 60 days and was gone for 5 months. And I was like, "Look, I don't want to do this as a girlfriend anymore. We've been talking about getting married." And so we got hitched in May of 2022 or 2020, excuse me. Um, and then a week later, they got activated again to deal with another response. And I'm like, this is why we got married. Like, aside from the fact that, I actually really love and cherish my spouse, but we ended up, we tried to plan a wedding reception in October of 2020, had to cancel it because both of us had gotten COVID a week out from it. Tried to reschedule it in September of 2021. Again, just celebration with the family and friends, like fairly low key, but still wanting to have those experiences for my parents and have those memories and photos. Then canceled it again because he was deployed, and I was in my end of my first trimester and beginning of my second trimester, and I was like, I'm done. I give up. So I think being a military spouse has taught me a lot of resiliency in ways that I never thought possible. But it also has given me such of an appreciation for what's important. So while all of those things were annoyances, they were not the end of the world, because at the end of the day, my husband came home from deployment safe. He is still able to be a dad. He's still able to be a husband. He's alive, right? Like, that is something that I don't take for granted. Um, and that just puts things into perspective, in a way that I never thought possible. Things that would seem like the end of the world for other people. Our perspective is, hey, you're alive. Like, that's what's important. Like, we're together. We've got the time spent. Like, these things, like, they don't they don't matter, right? Um,
Yeah.
they just uh, like, it's the perspective is that
Yeah.
we still have each other, and that's the most important part. Sanity, for that matter, too. Throughout life, he just completed a paramedic program that was a hybrid program where he was still working full time and had this, like, medical operations job that he was doing, and that was super time demanding too. But he was spending all of his weekends on clinical rotations, or in class or studying or things like that. So it was like a 6 month span where he was deployed without being deployed, and he was just, when he was home.
Right.
Yeah, it
Exactly.
kind of
It's
was,
almost
to be honest,
worse.
because when he would come home, the poor guy was just like a shell of a human, right? So, and it was a matter of, like,
Right.
okay, here's what needs to be done. I think I jokingly, but also half serious, looked at him one time and I said, look, we will weather this storm, and I support you in whatever career goals that you have. But right now, you can have one of two things: the house can be clean, or everybody can be alive. Like, both cannot coexist.
Right.
So, but I joke about that. But it's also like, okay, like, let's let the things drop off the radar that don't matter. Right now, what matters is that everybody's healthy, that I'm
Yes.
able to maintain, like, I can still work, I can still take care of our son, I can get food on the table. Like, how can I also help you and also maintain my own sanity? Like, whether that's getting a 30-minute ride in on the
Right.
Peloton, or going to work out, um, taking an hour to work out at work, or whatever it may be. Like, um, how can we kind of balance everything and make sure everything gets done that needs to get done? So, prioritization has been huge as a military spouse, and just learning what's important and what's not. Like, there's things that, like, yeah, it's a bummer when they don't happen, but it's not worth wasting my energy on. Because at the end of the day, like,
Right.
we're alive, we're healthy, we're thriving, and we're doing what the good Lord has called us to do. Like, we're supporting each
Yeah.
other. And that's, I think, the
Yeah.
most important thing that I've learned kind of as a military spouse. It's not been without a lot, like, significant
Mm.
challenge. It's not sunshine and rainbows. It is a
Yes.
rough life. But it's so worth it. And somebody said to me the other,
That's
yeah,
one of the things I loved about it too. Is that it's like this gift of never having that space where you don't know
yeah,
what's most important to you, and it's like every day I know not I don't know anything about pop culture. No, I haven't seen that
right
movie.
there
You
with
know what
you.
I mean? But like I know that my days are spent doing what's most important, and it's just such a
Oh, no,
gift.
no,
But anyway,
you're
I
good.
cut you
It's
off.
it's
What did
it's a
someone say to
weird
you the other
calm
day?
amongst the world
Yeah.
of chaos. It really is, when you kind of like hit that point. Um, it
Right.
just uh, it 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 just the priorities just. I mean, it just amazes me how much they shift, and how it just, you just kind of look at, like, what was important before, and some of the stuff seems so trivial now, especially when you're looking at balancing, like, a kid into the mix
Right.
too. But I had somebody at work, actually, the other day. It was one of the other clinicians that we work with, had said something to me where it was like, like, being a military, I forget exactly the phrasing, but it was like, being a military spouse is, like, that's rough. And I was like, you have to separate it. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, you have to separate the job from the guy, right? Or the spouse, like, the person. Like, you have to separate the two.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
while he might right now identify as a medic in the Army, like, that might be his identity, that's not who he is. And I joked, I was
Right.
like, yeah, we got into a little bit of a spat the other day in the kitchen, because he's like, well, what do you, I was frustrated. I was like, you're not home before 7 p.m. You're not home before 8 p.m. Like, just text me when you're going to be late. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do? I was like, I don't want you to do anything. I support you. I support you fully. I'm just saying that I'm allowed to say that it sucks sometimes. Like, like it's,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
I
He's
was
like,
like,
"I'm
I was
so
like, I
confused."
support you. You can do it all. I will be there. I will, like, I'll heat up dinner for you. Like, I was like, some
It's
days
just
it's hard.
hard.
Like,
Yeah,
I was like, but
it
you have to
is.
separate that job from the individual, because if you don't, then I think that's when I would start harboring resentment against him. Like, um, he can't right
Right,
now, like, this is
exactly.
what his job is, he can't control it, right? Like, so it's just, there's some sacrifices that occur with
Yeah.
that, and it's just me needing to be able to not excuse it, because I still deserve to be, treated with respect. I still deserve to have my needs met too. But I need to also understand that, like, there's some things that are out of his control, right? Like, if he gets stuck in a meeting, or something happens, or, like, his mission is a you're somebody in the military, like, you're serving others, like, you're serving the needs of our world, of our country. Like, that is different. And it's so important to separate those two, to make sure that, like, I don't harbor resentment against him. I cannot like his job. I cannot like his
Right,
job, but his
right,
job is temporary. He is
right,
forever. He is the person I'm going to be with.
right.
So it's
That's
so important to
right.
kind of separate those two things, and kind of have that, for me at least, have that perspective. And I'm in a unique situation where, I understand a lot of it, because I've worked in it for more than 10 years now. So, I have an
Right.
insight into the world. At the same time, I don't put up with the extra crap, but but I have a unique perspective, and that like I live in this world, so I understand the unpredictability of it, the everything that changes last minute, um,
Yeah.
everything that can just go down in the blink of an eye, cancel plans, like things that have to shift, like missed holidays, missed things like that. Like I get it. Like does it change that it sometimes it sucks? Like no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's allowed to. It's okay
Right.
that if it's bad sometimes, like it's okay
Yeah.
that it's a bummer. But at the end of the day, like he is not the
Right.
job. He is my husband, and at some point we will move on from the Army, and we will have a different life, and that's something to look forward to too. Like, but appreciating what we can in the moment and making the best of kind of when the moments just aren't as good. But like at the end of the day, we're still together.
Yeah.
He's still alive. I'm alive. Our son is happy. Like everybody's thriving. Like some days more than others, but everybody's kicking. I still make
Yeah.
him. I still make him text me every single
Yeah.
time he hits the ground after jumping out of an airplane. I was like, we will not take safety for granted. Yes.
And you
Yes.
should.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. It's so funny because even if you wanted, I mean, you do have to separate the job and the person. But sometimes, I find myself thinking in those moments where your thoughts are trying to lead you down this frustrating path or this path to bitterness, but it's like, no, because of his heart being the way it is,
Yes.
he puts in the extra effort because the heart that is in him that I fell in love with is he puts in the extra hours. And so it's like, you separate the job and the requirements from that individual because they don't have a lot of control over it. But it's like, man, like what a tragedy it would be to demand certain things when it's those very behaviors that like
Exactly.
that's why you love that person and that's why they're so unique anyway. And anyway, okay, well, you obviously have a behind the scenes view of, I mean, triumphs and struggles, honestly, like just from your own experience working in different military populations and your experience as a military spouse and working even like with the most elite military members we have. Considering, and I know this is a big ask, but considering all you've learned thus far, what do you think are just some like go-to pieces of advice or resources that you would recommend?
So first things, maintain humility, right? Um, everything that everything from being a military spouse and being married to somebody who's in the military to doing this job and serving those who have put their lives on the line for this country. Like I don't take that lightly. I never take that lightly. It's an honor to serve in this
Yeah.
way. It's an honor to um, be married to somebody who so selflessly put their name on the line to potentially give it all for this country, right? So I have 3 degrees and more than a decade of experience, but I'll never come close to knowing or understanding it all, right? And the second that I start thinking that I know
Right.
it all, that I can handle anything that comes my way, and that I've got this, I've seen it all, right? That's when I fail my population. That's when I fail as a wife. That's when I fail as an athletic trainer. That's
Yeah.
when I fail this population. So maintaining that humility is so important and never forgetting my why, right? So I think it's so important too. You talk about resources. It's so important to check in with my own mental health, to check in where I'm at, and to like continue to fuel that passion underneath. Whether that's a podcast on the way to work, or that is, um, reading a leadership book, or looking at like different ways that I can continue to expand my skill set, like never losing that spark, never losing that passion. And the second that it starts being more of a
Yeah.
job than a calling, then like, okay, do I need to reassess
Mm-hmm.
my career choices? Do I need to reassess where I'm at? Why is my mental, like, why
Yeah.
am I in this mental rut right now? Like, what's going on, and how can I either pull myself out of it, or what do I need to do to just change my situation entirely? So, it's never forgetting that humility for sure. I think one of the biggest pieces of advice, like I'm going to sound like a TSA ad here, but if you see something, say something, right? So just because something looks okay on the surface doesn't mean it is. And I could be the difference between life and death for
Yeah.
that person, right? So I think that's so important
Yeah.
where, like, in a multidisciplinary team like this, like, it's so easy to tap into the resources. It's so easy to walk into the next office and say, hey, I need you
Yep.
to do a drive-by with somebody because something's just not rubbing me right with this individual. Like, something is off underneath the surface. Like, I know this person
Mm-hmm.
and they said X, Y, and Z, and it just strikes me as odd. But like, as a military spouse, like, I've also done I've also served as a soldier and family readiness group leader. I still do. But like, knowing the resources that I have available to me is where I take a lot of calm
Yeah.
and peace, right? So like, knowing how to help somebody and not just say like, not just say I don't know and leave it at that, but like, I don't know, let me figure it out. So knowing your resources, whether you're a military spouse, whether you're somebody who works in this profession, or just anything in general with life, like knowing what's available to help somebody out in their like time of crisis, because there might not be a lot of time where like you identify somebody who needs help,
Right.
and you need to get involved and get into the weeds, right? So especially with our job as an athletic trainer or clinician. So you got people on a table, like they're already in their most vulnerable, like you said, like they're already in their most vulnerable position, right? So they're
Right.
already like,
Right.
things have already shifted. Like, it's important for me in that moment to know exactly how I can help that person, or to know the resources that I can access in order to help that person. Um, and then I think, like, just what we were talking about before, like, if I was giving somebody advice as a spouse or somebody who's about to be a spouse, like, separate that person from the job, right? Like, we're in a,
Yeah.
I think we're in a time where divorce rates are super high anyway, but like, especially in the military field, um, like, it's not an
Mm-hmm.
easy lifestyle. Like, pulling the wool off my eyes and not romanticizing what it is in this field is super important, and was super important, like, from the get-go. And that comes back down to maintaining that humility, but like, separate the person from the job, right? There's some things that are just out of the person's control. Like, I think that's super super important, giving the spouse some grace, but also not making excuses for their actions too. Like, there needs to be a line, and having that open communication, I think, is so important too. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's constantly
Yeah.
changing. So yeah, keep up the talking. There's no it's really hard to draw a line in the sand because that line no longer makes sense in a different
Right.
circumstance or situation. So yeah, don't keep up the communication. Don't draw lines in the sand, and
For sure.
separate the job and the person. Yeah, give grace. Okay. If there's someone listening to your story, they feel that urge, they feel that call to serve in a way that's unique to them, but they don't know where or how to get started, what
So
would you
I mean,
suggest? You mentioned
if you're a
yeah,
faith-based
go ahead.
person, like, pray. If you're not a faith-based person, consider praying. Like, walking with the good Lord in this life makes the water far less murky. It really does. And it just lights the way. Like, I'm here in this moment exactly as I am because the good Lord put me here, right? He gave me the tools to be able to do this job. He gave me the drive. He gave me the passion. He gave me the desire to serve and have that servant heart, and to reach out, and just do good for others. Like, I don't take that for granted. Sometimes when you're in the trenches of everything, I think it's hard to sometimes remember that, and it's important to kind of be able to refocus that
Yeah.
daily, whether that's I have a 35-minute drive into work, and that's my time where I get to pray, or listen to podcasts or music, or what have you, like, to be able to kind of recenter that and go into my day, with the servant heart that I need to have in this field, right? I think it's so important too to find
Yeah.
something that you're passionate about and just let that guide you, right? So like, I knew that I wanted to be an athletic trainer. I knew that I had this call to, like, I felt drawn to this, to serve our military in some way. And then I just said, hey, like, give me a sign. And I had a literal sign, like a literal sign. Sometimes it's not always that black and white, but like, I could have been like, that's funny,
Yes.
and then moved on and never done anything about it too, right? So like, not being afraid to, like, have a door shut, and then have to jump through a window, right? Like, shove your foot in the door, go through the window if the door is shut. Like, if a door is shut, there's meant to be another one that's open. Don't get discouraged. Don't let that passion get discouraged. Like, continue to keep that fire, find something that fuels that fire, and go. And then honestly, like, we are in a world of like, everything is at our fingertips for better or worse. Google, network, build relationships, right. Like, reach out to people, like, talk to people, like, maintain those relationships, like, especially in like this field, like, everybody knows somebody, right? So like, you might not know somebody that's in this specific job or in this specific setting, but like, somebody I bet you knows somebody else and can help kind of get you those connections. Fight for a seat at the table and don't let anybody tell you no, right? Like, I'm a female working in a male dominated environment. I was at Ranger School, working at Ranger School when gender integration started in the military, like with combat arms. And I have always been somebody who is a firm believer in, like, it doesn't matter if I'm male or female. It does not matter. It matters the job that I do. And that reputation is so important of what I bring to the table. It doesn't matter what I am, right? It does not matter. It matters what I can do and how I can serve others. So, I've always used that to fight for a seat at the table and not let somebody tell me no. Like, all right, let me work. Like,
Absolutely.
let me show you I belong here.
Yeah. It's okay. It does not matter if you don't see a copy of yourself at that table. Probably it might even mean more so that you are needed and necessary at that table, but nothing about you disqualifies you from the desire and taking those small steps towards that desire that's been planted in your heart. So I so get that. Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time. I've taken too much of it already, but it's just too fun talking with you. And I just want to say thank you for, just your diligence, your caring nature. You do carry with you a lot of humility. Like, I have seen the effort that you put into caring for other people and making them feel comfortable, just so that they can have the absolute best experience while they are kind of in a down and out position. And the optimism you bring to work with you every day and to your team is invaluable. Like, you cannot put a price on it. And thank you for being just that caring and supportive military spouse and loving mom. So you're setting the bar high for the rest of us. And it's just a pleasure to know you and a pleasure to
thank you for inviting me. It was an honor to be here. So thank you so much.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for another incredible episode of In the Name of Service. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe. And of course, feel free to share with those you feel would like to be inspired. Have a difference maker in your life that you'd like to see featured? Reach out to Dr. Barb Thompson at inthenameofservice@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.